Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Women in Screenwriting. And today we are talking about the classic, iconic 1989 film When Harry Met Sally, written by the brilliant Nora Ephron. And today I am joined by Lorna. Lorna. How are you,
I get
Lorna?
it all the time.
How are you going? Are you well?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Yeah.
Good news. Yeah, good. On this cold pre-Christmas
Oh,
evening.
yeah.
Um, so let's kick off maybe by talking about what are you bringing to this viewing of When Harry Met Sally. Give us your baggage on this film.
So I watched it. Obviously I didn't watch it at the time. I say obviously. But no, I was a bit young to watch it at the time. But I don't know
Right.
when I first watched it, but I have watched it many, many times. So I do have a lot of love for this film. And um and even though there's probably are some problematic things with it, I can't see them. All I see is just
Yeah.
a love for that show.
Yeah. It's like that, isn't it? Do you find it's one of those movies that you can quite comfortably just go back to over and over and over again?
Yes, without a doubt, I could happily just go and watch it again now, and
Yeah,
be
I'm a bit the
like,
same.
hmm,
Yeah, I was thinking about it earlier today, and I thought, I wonder if I could actually calculate how many times I've watched this film, like just give it a go. And I thought, well, I don't think I saw it when it first came out,
hmm,
but I would have seen it probably first saw it in the early 90s, maybe. So
hmm,
maybe like 1993 or something.
yeah,
I'm guessing based on, you know, my age and where I think I was at that point in time.
yeah,
And so I reckon I've watched it I definitely have watched it every year since then,
wow, yeah,
without question.
mm,
And some years, particularly around that, mid to late 90s, I probably watched it more than once a year. So
mm,
I'd be getting up there in the tens of, the well, certainly the mid tens of times that I've watched this film. But I, like you, just absolutely love it. Every time it's on TV, of course, you're going to
mm,
watch it.
yeah,
It's just one of those films. So
yeah,
we'll talk a little bit about what makes it one of those films that we just keep going back to. So maybe let's talk a little bit about the structure of the film.
mm,
So it's written by Nora Ephron, who is, I think, just a genius writer and sort of across platform, brilliant writer, books, plays, films, just amazing. And I think one of the strengths, well, probably the key strength of this film is its writing. So it'll be really good to sort of dig into that a little bit. But structure wise, we've got a pretty straightforward, a pretty clear 3-act structure in this film. We were
yeah,
talking about Some Like It Hot the other day, and about whether, was that a 4 acts or 5 acts or how many
yeah,
acts were there in that? There was a
yeah,
lot of acts, but this one seems to be quite straightforward.
yeah,
But one of the things I noticed was that the first act is quite long, and
mm,
the inciting incident takes a while to get to.
yeah.
What were your thoughts about it
Yeah,
structurally?
well, to me, I felt like all the acts were balanced of equal length. I know we've had a quick discussion about this.
Hmm.
So I was thinking that the first act was before they become friends, and then the second,
Mm-hmm.
which is half an hour,
Mm-hmm.
and then the second act being while they're friends, which is again half an hour, and then the third act starts to me when they sleep together, and then that's another half an hour.
Yeah, right. Well, okay. Well, we're agreed on the first act because I
Yeah,
definitely
yeah.
agree with you. I think it finishes at that point where, well, and I guess this is a question. I feel like it finishes at the inciting incident, which is
Mm,
really late at the end of the first act, which I think, and I'd love to know what you think the inciting incident is. I think it's the point that Sally asks Harry to go to dinner. I
mm,
think that's the inciting incident because that's the moment that they move from being this thing that they just bump into each other every couple of
yeah,
years to
yeah,
actually the friendship. That's sort of
yeah,
beginning of the friendship, if you like.
yeah.
Would you agree with that, or did you see there
Yeah,
was another point?
yeah. I mean, because I suppose you could argue that the film kicks off with them deciding to drive over to New York together. But you're
Mm.
right. That it really, they're not, seeing as the central plot is about their relationship. Their relationship doesn't really start until that friendship develops, and she asks him as friends.
It's funny, isn't it? Because it doesn't feel like a very strong inciting incident, really, does
Mm.
it?
No.
In traditional script writing terms, it's a bit like, well, let's go. Should we have dinner? Okay,
Mm.
sort of thing, which is
And
weird.
yet that's how every relationship starts, isn't it? Is
Yeah,
ultimately is like, let's do something together.
yeah, exactly. Good point. And the funny thing about what I love about the first act is it's so neat. Like it starts off like they actually have a little character arc from the beginning of the first act
Mm.
to the end of the first act. And actually, I was just thinking about it today. I thought if you wanted to take out the first 30 minutes of that movie, you could make a really satisfying short film with that
Mm.
first act just in itself, where the kind
Yeah.
of where the film ends with them going, oh well, let's go and have
Mm.
dinner. So which I thought was really cool, really neat.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, so okay, so first act is until that point in time where they become friends, I guess. Second act, see, I saw it a little bit differently, and it's good to chat about it. I felt like the kind of rising action, I guess, or the rising tension, if you like, is
Mm.
quite quick in that second
Yeah.
act. So because
Yeah.
everything is all kind of, it's all, you get this kind of montage of them all doing great things together, and the friendship builds and the friendships builds. But then I thought that the end of the second act was way after they'd slept together, because I
Mm.
felt that was like the conflict then, or the downslide
Yeah.
kicks in at the sort of at the point that they sleep together. And I felt like the real low, which is the beginning into then act three, is the point at which they're at Jess one in their friend's wedding,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that moment where they say to them that's like this, like they've had this
Yeah.
big fight,
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
say, if either of us were in any way attracted to these two, you know it's like they're so humiliated and everybody laughs
Yeah.
at them, and they've just
Yeah.
had a
I
big
know.
row, and
How
it's kind of
cruel is that?
it's a hilarious line
Yeah.
though, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
such a
Yes.
brilliant line. But and there's just that point where there's the two of them standing with this look on their faces like, oh
Mm.
my God. And I kind of
Mm.
thought, okay, well, is that the end of act two? And
Mm.
is the beginning of act three, does it then go into the kind of New Year stuff? Like the
Mm.
post Christmas
Yeah.
New Year? I don't know.
Yeah.
Because that's
Yeah.
that's again kind of about half an hour's worth of, but I don't know. I don't know.
Mm.
Could be either.
Yeah.
But yeah. So, on to our characters. So this is very clearly a two protagonist film, or is it? Um, they're both some character arcs for both of them.
Mm.
Personally, I think one is stronger than the other, but I'm really interested to hear your thoughts. You've got, character wise, you've got Harry Burns, the cynical, love is useless, a waste of time. He's just sort of quite sassy and,
Mm.
yeah, but very cynical. His cynicism is
Mm.
very strong, doesn't believe in relationships, and that's why he behaves appallingly, apparently. Sally Albright, by comparison, is much more optimistic. She's quite
Mm.
romantic. But she's got this optimism that I think sort of sticks with her through the film. What are your thoughts about them character wise?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously Harry is really annoying. We've all known boys like that at university, haven't we? It's like they just think that they're so deep because they think about death. It's like,
Yeah,
get over it. And
not just.
yeah, like Sally says, you're just going to end up like wasting your life thinking about death.
Yeah,
Just
I
like,
thought that was brilliant. I thought he came. I mean, he's
mm,
such an angry young man, isn't he?
mm,
In that beginning, and yeah, so typical, such a stereotype, but so fantastically believable, and I love it. I read the last page of the book because in case I die before I finish the book,
yeah, for
it's like,
heaven's sake.
whoa, he's so tough, he's so
Yeah,
deep.
because and that would be the worst thing about
Yeah,
dying, would be
exactly.
not reading the end of the book.
Exactly. But it's like I'm so prepared, I'm
Yeah,
so prepared.
yeah.
It's really
Yeah.
funny. But actually, I also think, and I don't know what you think, I think, because I know you said Harry was a bit annoying, I think that Sally could be really annoying as well as a character.
Oh, I
'Cause-
mean, without a doubt, yeah. Yeah. I mean,
but
her optimism is equally potentially annoying as well, isn't it? And so
yeah,
that's why they kind of like completely bounce off each other to start off with. Although he's
Definitely.
still quite happy to consider sleeping with her, just because it's like
Exactly.
he'd consider anybody, really. She's
He would.
attractive. There you
Well,
go.
or even if then she's not attractive. I think he made that
Yeah,
quite clear, didn't he? So
yeah.
it's too late. It's already out there, which is great. But I also think one of the things that saves, because I think Harry is a bit annoying but kind of funny, and it's his wit that sort of saves him.
Yeah,
But
it
what
is.
saves Sally, I think, and is her and I don't know what your thoughts are, but the the way her peculiarities, and the fact
Mm,
that, because she's quite particular and quite orderly, and when, like, in a
mm.
car, she's got the map
Yeah,
all marked out.
yeah.
It's on the visor, everything's neat and tidy and perfect,
Mm,
and it's a little bit like, she's a bit too perfect. But what
yeah,
sort of saves her, I think, is the fact that she does have that really random way of ordering
yeah,
things, in which makes her a bit more endearing, rather than
yeah.
become actually quite annoying. So they're
Depends on
both
whether or not you're the waiter or waitress, though, doesn't it?
yeah, exactly. And that waitress's face in that scene
Yeah,
was
yeah.
just magic. It was a beautiful moment. But yeah, so they've both got some annoyances, but both have
Mm,
these sort of redemption about them. What did you think about? Well, okay, well, no, let's talk about arcs first. What did you
mm.
think about their arcs? Do they both have character arcs? Are they as strong as each other? What do you think?
I think Harry's is probably stronger, don't you? Because
Yes.
he's the one that really needs to kind of get his head out of his own ass a bit and then realize that he does have feelings. And obviously, he spends the whole of the second act realizing that he has feelings once she's gone.
Yeah. Typical.
And so Helen's gone, and suddenly he's like, "Oh, this she's gone," and it does completely destroy him.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And
and
it's nice, the reflection, don't you think, um of their friends who
mm,
get together, like they introduce them, and then you see their relationship take this perfect sort
yeah,
of arc into marriage, because I guess that's
yeah,
what their
yeah, yeah,
desires were. It's lovely, all
mm,
those beats of a typical
yeah,
traditional relationship: get
yeah,
married, live together. I'm sorry, meet, get married, live together, great friends, great
yeah,
relationship, boom. And
mm.
then there's like Harry and Sally that
Yeah,
just go the other way and just
yeah,
combust. And it's beautiful. I love the way they sort of
yeah,
reflected, this is what you could be
mm,
doing, but
mm,
Harry, mainly, you're such an idiot.
mm,
This is what you miss
yeah,
out on.
yeah.
And how else did you find his arc was stronger than Sally's?
Well, in the final act, it's very much about him and his realization, and so all she needs to do is to forgive him for being a bit of a douche to her.
Yeah,
So although because in the second act, they've both kind of got different issues going on. She's pretending she's fine about her and Joe being over, and that is her barrier to moving on.
mm,
Whereas uh, for him, his barrier to moving on is just so he's just having lots of relationships that are all really superficial and pretending
mm,
that that is going to help him move on. But
mm.
um, so they're both going about it in different ways.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you're right. I think Harry definitely has the bigger arc. He seems to have the bigger shift from the cynic who doesn't believe in love to someone who does believe in love,
Mm,
and actually is quite romantic at the end,
yeah,
which is,
yeah.
and certainly in their little outtake at the end,
Mm,
it's quite nice. But what I think is interesting is that Casablanca moment. So there's
mm,
2 points in the film where they talk about Casablanca. One's right at the beginning in the car, and
yeah,
it's an argument that they have
yeah.
about what the characters in Casablanca should do,
Mm,
and they're both very vehement about it. They both have opposite opinions, and they're very strong. And then,
mm,
but then in sort of the what is it the second, well, certainly in the second
yeah,
act, when they're on the phone and they're watching it
yeah.
on the television,
Hmm.
and they're both softer. And actually, Sally, what
Mm.
does Sally say? Something like
She
she didn't
Yeah,
believe that
yeah. She
she.
said that she would never have chosen the other guy over Humphrey Bogart, and she can't believe that she
Yeah,
said that.
yeah. So that's a lovely moment, because it shows
Yeah,
us how both of them have started to shift.
yeah,
Even Sally. So, and I don't think, I mean, Sally does stay
mm,
organized and optimistic to the end. I
mm,
don't think she has this
yeah,
massive shift, but she does soften slightly, doesn't she?
yeah, yeah. She
Yeah.
does. She does.
And even
And
at the
she
end,
loses some of the practicality. She was at the start, she was very rigid and practical in terms of, and she was trying to be rigid and practical in terms of her emotions as well, wasn't she?
yeah,
Well, and they were both controlling their emotions in different ways. Um,
yes,
so he was
yeah.
keeping everything superficial, and so was she, but just doing things in very opposite ways.
Yeah, and I think she also had this idea of perfection, didn't she? She was
Mm,
going to New York. She knew how her life, how her
yeah.
life was going to pan out, and she was going to be a journalist, and she was going to be amazing. She was going to meet this guy, and then when with Joe, when that
Mm,
doesn't work out, I think so. I guess the arc for her is about maybe being
mm,
more realistic about relationships, maybe.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
then right at the end, that little outtake of those two that meets the other little vignettes that are inserted all
Yeah.
the way
Yeah.
through when they have their
Yeah.
little vignette. I loved it that Harry then says, "Oh, you know, you have to have the chocolate sauce on the side because
Yeah.
not everybody
Yeah.
likes it on the coconut cake." And I thought, isn't that interesting? So Sally is just exactly the same, but
Yeah.
he's come around to her way of thinking on that sort
Yeah.
of stuff. So you got a
Yeah.
real sense of that stronger arc from him, I think, which was
Yeah. Yeah.
kind of funny. But yeah, kind of nice. Um, were there anything else you noticed character wise on the pair of them?
Something popped into my head and it's popped back out again.
It's all right.
And it was
Pop
about
back in again.
Harry and his cynicism. It was Harry and
Right.
his cynicism. Um, and
Do you want to come back
so
to it?
yeah, maybe. So yeah, so he was try. I'm probably going to end up saying the same point as I said before. Um,
That's all right. Talk it through. Talk it through. You'll get there. It'll get there. Sometimes you need to do that. And you need to talk around it and then come back to it.
Yeah. Yeah, so and he's using so oh, that was it. I remember now.
There it
He
is.
was
There it is.
using his cynicism to protect himself from
Yes.
getting hurt, but he ended up getting hurt anyway. So whatever you
Yes.
try and do to try and protect yourself from getting hurt, it doesn't work. You're going to get hurt anyway. So Sally was using her optimism to try and protect herself from getting hurt, and eventually she finally hit a wall, and she was like really accepting the fact that she was upset about Joe,
Yeah.
and that he was wanting to marry someone else,
Yeah,
and he never
definitely.
wanted to marry her.
Yeah, that was really funny, wasn't it? It was a great scene.
Even though she accepted that she never wanted to marry him
I
either.
know. Doesn't matter though, does it?
No.
Doesn't matter. It's completely irrelevant. But yeah, I like that. And I like the way that again through that arc that, you know, Sally's both of them lost their relationships. Sally was hurt, but it was more about the idea of it rather than the exactly as you said. It was like she didn't want to marry him either, but that didn't matter. It was the principle of it, you know.
Yeah,
It was
yeah,
the
yeah.
upsetter more than the actual thing. Whereas with Harry, even though he was massively cynical and didn't believe in love, when he did get married, he got really hurt by that. Like that relationship really floored him. So actually that reinforced for him that his
Yeah,
cynicism at the beginning was
yeah,
correct and he should have been
yeah.
more like that. So that was a really, and then obviously took ages for him to come around out of that, which was interesting. Um, let's talk for a second about the little vignettes. What did you think of the vignettes as of those couples that got interspersed through the film? It was a really interesting technique. What did you think?
Yeah, but they're so cute, aren't they? I just absolutely adore them. I just want to like see the film of every single one of those stories, don't you?
Yeah, totally, totally. They are really lovely, aren't they? Very heartwarming, and well, they do a couple of things too because they kind of chapterize the film a little bit. They give
Yeah.
us these little breaks, but also it gives you those different sort of dimensions to love as well, which I think is lovely, and also then highlights the sort of friendship thing because ultimately the question is about can men and women ever be friends, just friends? So I
Yeah.
think it sort of goes to answer that a little way. Um, so that brings us to an interesting point about the premise of this rom com. So this is a rom com, but one of the things I think makes it's a little bit different, isn't it? It's not like a typical rom
Yeah.
com. So it
Yeah.
uses
Yeah.
a lot of the rom com beats and sort of formulas, but it doesn't. I don't think it doesn't have any of the contrivances. Is that a word? of of other rom-coms. What do
Yeah.
you think?
Yeah, it is definitely different. It is structured slightly differently. And usually you do get just one perspective, don't you? And you've obviously got the dual protagonist thing going on here.
Mm,
Um, and yeah, it's got, I think because so much of it is about their friendship, and again, but it does do the 80s rom-com thing of tying it up quite quickly and neatly at the end, just suddenly, and
mm.
then da 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 da, she flips him.
Yes, yes. That's true. That's true. I think one of the things I was thinking about was that is it, and I guess it probably is a question around, like I think about that premise a lot, and I think one of the reasons of the success of the film is because of that premise, and because it's almost a universal question, isn't it?
Mm,
You know, like
mm,
it asks, you know, can men and women ever be friends? And there's something about that question, you know, or whoever it is, you know, it doesn't, you know, it
mm.
doesn't have to be men and women or whatever, you know,
Yeah.
can people that could be attracted to each other ever just be friends, just friends?
Mm,
And I think that's one of the strengths is that it does, and I think that's why it's always appealing, because there's
mm.
always people that want to or are asking that question or are in the throes of that sort of world. So yeah,
Yeah.
do you think
Mm.
that could be one of the things that makes it
Yeah,
strong?
yeah, probably. And is the answer no at the end of the day? Is that what the film's trying to say?
Well,
Ultimately, no.
what do you think?
I mean, the end would suggest ultimately no. But obviously,
That's
they are
interesting, isn't it?
genuine friends in the middle, and they're really not thinking about sleeping with each other until they are.
Well, I don't know. I think oh, that's a really good point, because I thought that maybe it was about, well, you have to be, it's almost like you have to be friends to be, like the
Well,
friendship
I
is the
mean,
core thing,
yes,
you know?
yes, yeah.
That maybe
Maybe
that's
it's
just,
the question's the wrong question. Maybe that's what it is. Is that
do you think?
can you be in a relationship if you're not friends? I mean,
Yeah.
and really, ultimately, the friendship is the thing that really kind of is the foundation of everything.
And is the difference between Harry's fly by nights relationships that are
Mm,
relatively shallow and, yes. And I guess that, because that's, I think, ultimately what makes Harry scared, isn't it? Is that he does
yeah,
recognize that strength of feeling um, Sally, and it scares him, doesn't it?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, and the thing is that as hard as I am on Harry, and as much as he annoys me, my character arc is more like Harry's than it is than Sally's. So you know,
Yeah.
it says a
Yeah.
lot about
Yeah.
me the fact that he annoys me so much.
Well, a bit of seeing yourself perhaps in him.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think, well, yeah, it's an interesting question, isn't it? And perhaps we've all been Harry and all been Sally at some point in
Yeah.
our lives anyway, but that's another podcast, and not one about filmmaking. But also thinking, just back to that premise point, so, you know, it is a universal question. And I was thinking about, I think that is part of its success, in the same way that if you think about Friends, the fantastic series that again everybody loves, and has had this generational adoration, you know,
Mm,
from Gen X right the way through,
yeah.
um, because the premise of that is about that time in your life when your friends are your family, which I
Mm,
think is
yeah.
that's neither of those is structured as a proper premise would be, as we are taught to structure a premise, but they are really fantastic, you know, thematic underpinnings for a film,
Mm,
because they are universal. And I think that's one of the things that makes them so strong.
yeah.
Does that make sense? Or am
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
barking up the wrong tree? Yeah.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I find, and it's one of the things I struggle with around writing a premise. A lot of the time, this is just my experience, I like to write a premise around a question, which is a
Mm,
kind of, it has a broad, has a broad opportunity for exploration, I guess.
mm.
And so and maybe that's it. Maybe actually that's it. Maybe I just answered it. Maybe it's because that's the kind of films that I'm attracted to, are ones
Yeah,
that
yeah.
explore
Yeah, that's
questions
true.
rather than, you know,
Yeah.
necessarily have a protagonist and a sort of stakes and a whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. So, what are some of the? Oh, well, actually, let's talk about some of the things that we liked about this. Let's talk about that scene. That
Yeah.
scene, that iconic. And I'm talking about the orgasm scene, but it is iconic, isn't it? It has transcended the film. It has come into our
Yeah.
culture. We talk about it all
Yeah.
the time. That I'll have what she's
Mm.
having is just,
Yeah. My
what
favorite
is
line
it?
of any film, I think.
Is it?
I think
Is it
so.
your favorite
Yeah.
line? Yeah, it's
Yeah.
pretty good, isn't it? Apparently, I heard that they workshopped this scene, or I read that they workshopped this scene, and Billy Crystal threw it in at the end
Mhm.
of the workshop, which I think is just it's just a
Yeah.
genius line, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
And the scene would not be what it is without that scene.
Yeah.
What is it about it that makes that scene so iconic? Is it about that it's so? Oh, it's about an orgasm. Is it that, or is it more than that? Do you think?
I mean, obviously there's the shock factor, but it's also, um, I mean, have we ever seen anything like it before or since? I don't think so. I think, but it's the charm of the two characters, and it's the fact that Sally is so determined to make her point known. I mean, because she is uptight. Out of
Hmm,
the two of them, she is the most uptight, but she
she is.
manages to get him feeling uncomfortable, which I don't think it's
Yeah.
quite difficult to do.
Yes, that's true. And I think that's one of the things we'll come back to the scene in a second, but I think that's one of the strengths of Sally's character is she holds her own all the way through that movie.
Mm,
She's there's never a question of her not being his equal. She really
yeah,
does
yeah.
equal him all the way through, which is great. Do you think it's also about the fact again going back to the universalness and the and yeah the kind of intrigue of the universal stuff, the fact that she actually takes Harry to task on something that we don't talk about, like like
Yeah,
he's got this idea about, oh, I know when I
yeah,
when
yeah,
somebody's having a great
yeah.
time, blah, blah, and she just takes him and she talks about something that, like, well, we've never seen, we had never seen that on screen, that sort of
Yeah.
you know as first thing, but also I think the fact that she just takes him to task on something that
Mm.
we just didn't talk about then, did we?
No, no, absolutely not.
Which was,
Absolutely not.
yeah, which I thought was great. And obviously I think Meg Ryan did a brilliant job at that scene. That's part of, I think, the strength of it as well.
Yeah.
Just fantastic, like just a great performance. Apparently it was the director's mum who was the character that delivered that
Really?
final line, which I think is kind of cute.
Yeah.
Just like a little bit embarrassing. Would you
Yeah.
put your mum in the scene to say that line of your mum?
Probably not, no.
No, a really interesting choice, but like he obviously saw the strength of that line, right? And was like, wow, I mean, what a great
Mm,
thing to have as a
mm,
legacy. I said
mm.
that line, it's me as a character, which is great. What other things anything else about that scene that felt that was made it particularly iconic, or do you think it is just that combination of the topic and the times kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean that, but also because I think it is a turning point for Harry. I think he
Oh yeah,
does because he doesn't have a comeback to that, and normally he does have a comeback. I mean,
that's true actually. Yeah.
and so he doesn't often have a like a moment of like, oh, okay. So he
Yeah,
just kind of changes his whole world view at that point, I think.
yeah,
Is it the
that's true.
midpoint? I don't actually know where it is, but obviously it is in the second act. But
Yeah,
I
it would
wouldn't be
be about,
surprised if it was kind of in there as the
yeah,
midpoint for
towards that
him
midpoint.
as a
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
character. But
yeah.
also for her, because it shows her kind of becoming less uptight as well.
Well,
So,
exactly, right. You can't be uptight to do that in a restaurant, can
no,
you?
yeah.
You got to be feeling right to do that. So yeah, there is that. I think that's really interesting. I do wonder. Maybe it is around the midpoint. It's got to be,
Mm,
hasn't it? It's got
yeah,
to be.
yeah.
Um. So what else? What about things like what other things? Well, I'll throw something at you. One of the things I also liked about this film was the language and the fact that the language was really. I felt like nothing was throwaway, but
Mm,
also there was a real naturalness to the
Yeah.
language. There was a real
Yeah.
the sort of repetition of phrases, and
Mm.
just it was very like they talked, the characters talked very in that
Mm.
sort of messy way that we
Yeah.
talk, which I
Yeah.
thought was really really good. Did you notice anything about that that
I mean,
you thought
apart from to say that it was so natural,
mm,
so just kind of when they're just wandering around art galleries and things or museums, and they are just chatting, and they just kind of sometimes go off on tangents. There's something about it, like Harry says at some point that he thinks that hieroglyphs are just like cartoons.
yes,
About a character
yes,
called Sphinxy, and in the
yes.
midst of them having a much more deep conversation, and then like it comes back again, and that it does feel very real in terms of the way
Yeah.
that people just kind of natter away to each other who are very comfortable with each other.
And that's what it shows, doesn't it? That
Mm,
and the comfort and the authentic friendship, I think,
mm,
which is
yeah,
great. I love the line, and it's such a weird line, but I loved the line when they were playing, gosh, on the board game. What's it called when you play the board?
Pictionary.
Picture
Yeah,
kind of pictionary thing, yeah.
yeah,
And when Jess said, and they're all calling out, and Sally is drawing the mouth
yeah,
and
yeah,
the
the
baby,
baby.
and he goes, and he yells, he goes, baby fish mouth. But they're trying to guess. And he goes,
Yeah.
baby fish mouth, baby fish. And then at the end, and they go, no, it's baby talk. And he goes, baby talk? That's not a phrase. And Billy
Yeah.
Crystal goes, oh, yeah, but baby fish mouse is sweeping the nation.
Yeah, yeah,
Just
yeah.
like so good.
Yeah.
It just takes that really sassy moment of when you are with your friends and someone does
Yeah.
say something really stupid, and so I love that. I thought that really created yeah, that friendship really nicely. But
Yeah.
it also wasn't a wasted line. It kind of,
Mm.
it added to the humor obviously, but also showed, a bunch of things about the characters which I really loved. And so just on that, before I forget, back to your Sphinxy point, I've had some discussions with friends over years about this movie, like lots. And one of the things that sometimes comes up as a contested point is around that part in the film where they are in the museum and Billy Crystal says, waiter, there is too much pepper on. And I have some friends who get very upset at that piece in the film. They just really don't like it. They don't
Mm.
see it as value. Did you have any feelings about that? I know it's a random thing to ask, but yeah.
Yeah. I felt like, I mean, apart from the fact that it could be taken as like insulting to certain people,
Oh well, that's true. That's true.
yeah,
Yes.
but I think he's trying to take on a different persona to be able to get the courage up to ask her actually on a date. And so he there
Right.
is kind of vying for potentially taking it to the next stage at that point. And then
Right.
she's already organized a date because she doesn't in any way think that
Yes.
he has feelings for her.
Yes, right. Okay, so this is the point we consider, does that piece of, and yes, granted you're right, and I probably shouldn't have mimicked that then. Sorry, you can cut that out. Is should, is that point, um is that shift about, I wondered whether maybe that makes that kind of mucking about, messing
Mm,
about that you do with someone who you're really close with,
mm,
and you would only really do that sort of mimicky stuff with someone you really know really well.
mm,
Does that then heighten the drop when he asks her out and she says no? I wondered whether it was to do that, whether it was to
mm,
make that drop. Because if they weren't messing about and he just said, "Oh, do you want to come out for dinner?" and she said no, it's less impactful. Or maybe, or I think you might be right. It might be about. Do you think it's more about him getting up the nerve to ask her?
I do, yeah. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
that's about him trying to. I think that's him trying to lessen the drop. Like, I'm not really being serious here. I'm not really being myself here. I'm just being silly, and I'll just ask you out
right,
on a date, and then.
right. Interesting. Interesting. Okay, so either of those, but it must
Mm,
have a purpose then. So it's got
mm,
to do one of those
yeah.
kind of things. Okay. So, what other things? Are there anything you didn't like about the film, or you?
Um.
like
Well,
less
I
now.
mean, yeah, like I've said, is that Harry does annoy me from time to time, but again, that's on me as much as it is anything else. But it is that. So initially, it's that kind of him presuming to know anything about her, and that him thinking that he's really deep, and so she, because she's happy, she must be shallow, and that all those kind of assumptions that kind of get broken down a bit during the journey that they have together. And if they hadn't have had that initial journey of them kind of getting over their initial assumptions about each other and annoyances, I mean, they still, obviously, there are those annoyances there, but by the end, she would have gladly actually kept in touch with him as a friend. It's just that he said
Yeah.
that they couldn't be friends. But I think that long drawn out forced proximity did kind of break down some of their barriers to each
Yeah.
other in a way that if they'd have just initially met, they'd have just gone, ugh, and then never thought again of each other. Um,
Yeah, got you.
so
Yeah.
yeah, it's just because you have at the university there were so many boys like that. It's just like, oh, does he really get to have a happy ending?
Right. So annoying boys aside, were there any other things that you particularly liked in this film?
um
Any moments, any
Yeah, I
lines?
mean, there's the obviously there's the orgasm scene. You can't, and the I'll have what she's having, and there's I mean there's when she calls up Harry and says Joe's getting married. That, I mean, I love that moment because finally she's accepted the fact that she's not fine with the breakup. It's taken
Yeah.
all that time for her to suddenly finally admit that there is
Yeah.
pain there
Yeah.
that she needs to face.
And Harry responded really well, didn't he?
Yeah, well,
In terms
exactly.
of going straight
Straight
over there.
over. Yeah,
Yeah.
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 He understood what that meant. Everything
Yes,
about
he
that
did.
statement, he understood every layer of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah, which was good. So that was really the point that we saw the true friendship, didn't we?
Yes. Yeah.
Before it got really awkward. Um,
Yeah.
um, I liked. I want to talk about the grapes spit bit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's one of my favorite parts of the film, and for a couple of reasons. So this is the part up front when they're on their journey, and Harry's being annoying and talking about how tough he is and how he's so prepared for death and how he reads the end of the books and blah blah blah, and he's eating grapes. And
Yeah.
what I love about this is he comes in, he like crashes into Sally's perfect world. You know, she's got her
Mm.
neat car and the
Yeah.
maps on the visor and everything's tidy and organized in the back. And he gets in and he's like leaning into the back, like he's got like a
Yeah.
button of face trying to grab
Yeah.
his grapes, you know.
Yeah.
And he just comes in as this force of disruption, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and he sits there and then he starts, and I love it. And he chews the grape, and then he says a line, and then he spits the grape, and it hits the window, and he goes, "I'll wind down the window," right? And it's just so funny. But then it's not just that point. It's then he goes on to continue to spit the pips out
Yeah.
as he
Yeah.
delivers his lines.
Yeah.
And I like that. I think it's such a brilliant
Mm.
device because it
Yeah.
does two things. It kind of, well, A, it's just really funny in its own right.
Yeah.
B, it shows the disruption that he has, you know,
Yeah.
he's interrupting this perfect life. But
Yeah.
also, it gives the jokes a moment to land, you know, because
Yeah.
there's so much
Yeah.
fast paced dialogue. So it gives
Yeah.
us, it's almost like it's a beat that he
Mm.
goes, you know, line, spit, line,
Yeah.
spit, line. And it's just genius. So I
Yeah.
thought, from a filmmaking point of view, that's the magic of where the
Mm.
script writing and the
Yeah.
filmmaking come together.
Yeah.
Was just so good. Just love it
Yeah.
every time I see it. This, yeah,
It's true,
one of
and
my
you can
favorites.
see it in the script as well, can't you? In terms of and the thinking, in terms of there needs to be a pause here, and so she's woven in something there that says so much about his character, and will also add tension between the two of them.
Yes.
And it's just beautiful rather than just being like she sighs or something
Yeah. Yeah,
equally
definitely. Because
generic.
there are a lot of scenes in this movie where the two of them are sitting talking. So is a lot of opportunity to be boring. So
Yeah.
having things like that, like, well, if you think the cafe scene, the orgasm scene, is another scene where
Mm.
they're sitting talking. But what they do with that to make that really engaging.
Mm.
Same with this scene. This is two people driving in a car on a road trip. Could be really boring, but they mix it up, and so I love the way they do that, and they kind of add that filmmaking spice to it to
Mm.
just to really take the script and make it even better, which is great. It reminds me a little bit, and we didn't talk about it, but when we were talking, we were chatting about Some Like It Hot,
Mm.
in that scene where Jerry and Daphne, Geraldine and Daphne,
Mm.
where Daphne gets proposed to, and she's lying on a bed, and the Tony Curtis character comes in and says, "You can't marry Osgood," and he's got the maracas,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that scene, and he
Yeah.
keeps shaking his maracas like dancing
Yeah,
around,
yeah.
and I'm thinking, why is he shaking the maracas? But that the maracas do the same job as the
Yeah.
pips because they
Yeah.
let the jokes land because every
Yeah.
line escalates and escalates, but then
Yeah.
it allows it. It's
Yeah.
beautiful. So I love
Yeah.
those moments when you
And
see
then
them.
it goes from the kind of excited, it emphasizes the excited, and then the drop
Yes.
from like, oh, I'm a boy, I'm a
Yes.
boy, I'm a boy.
Exactly. So you get two. So the audience is allowed a break and
Mm.
understands the difference between the lines and can
Mm.
laugh, and
Mm.
then finish laughing, and then hear the next line, and then
Mm.
laugh again. But yeah, it also then and that helps and typifies the character as well
Mm.
because, gosh, what a gross boy is spitting the pips out the window anyway, right? So tells us a bit more about Harry's character. Anyway, we do love Harry. We don't
Yeah,
we don't want to
yeah.
pick on Harry. He's a good character, and he comes around in the end, which is
He
good.
does, yeah.
Um, any other points that you wanted to that you noticed in the film that you wanted to share?
So
Or have we covered everything?
as much as the end like makes me cry. I mean, I've literally only just finished watching it just before coming on this, and I don't know whether my eyes are still looking a little bit puffy, but oh yeah, I absolutely just it gets me every single time. But yeah, just in terms of the fact that it's really what's required of her is to forgive him for being a bit of an
Hmm.
arse, and
Yeah,
it's just like so often that essentially is what the girl's job, isn't it? In so
yeah.
many rom-coms,
Well,
is to
that's
forgive
true.
the boy for
That's
being a
true.
bit of an arse.
Yeah, that's true, actually. So there's an opportunity, isn't it, to turn
Mm,
that trope on its head
mm,
and make more characters that are reverse that or different again. Yeah.
mm.
If we were to visit Harry and Sally, would they still be together, do you think?
Oh, I hope so. Don't say that. Don't even put the question in my mind.
Sorry. Yeah.
Oh, I think yeah, they finally kind of um, found each other in amongst all
Yeah.
the noise of each other's lives and their kind of belief systems and the ways that they've got of protecting themselves.
Yeah.
They've finally kind of broken through all of that and gone, oh yeah, it's you.
Yeah.
It's always been
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. And it does, I mean, and I guess it's the thing, isn't it? It shows you that their relationship is based on really solid friendship and is
Mm,
good, is a really good, solid relationship
mm,
before. Because actually, remember, and I think goes back to the point about how it breaks a lot of the conventions of traditional rom
mm.
coms. It doesn't get romantic till nearly an hour in.
Yeah,
Like their
yeah,
relationship doesn't get romantic for a long time. So
yeah.
but again, it just reinforces how their relationship develops. And also, you're
Mm,
talking about over 12 years that
yeah.
their relationship has developed. So yeah, and so I guess so you would think that should make them on pretty solid ground. So don't worry, Lorna, they're okay. They haven't broken
Phew,
up. Everything's
phew.
fine. So, in summation, then, on our little dalliance to and Harry Met Sally, what would you say, if, from a screenwriting point of view,
Mm.
makes this such an iconic film?
It's just so beautifully written, isn't it? It's not it's so character driven,
Mm,
and it never forgets who the characters are. It doesn't make there's no point at which you think that the characters are acting against their normal way of behaving, everything, because occasionally with rom-coms in particular you can get like Yeah, did they that choice really make sense as for that character to do that? But every point, I think, that's very clearly signposted that this is what the characters would do. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
so even though
Yeah.
Sally is the one who kind of most of the time actually is the one that sees, like, so Harry initially is like, oh yeah, you're attractive, but that's as far as it goes. And
Mm.
then, but in terms of emotionally, most of the time it's Sally that kind of realizes there's a bit more there under the surface. But even in the early days after she's broken up with Joe and she's actually going on a date, that that isn't surprising to me that she's kind of
Mm.
not at all thinking of Harry in that way, because
Mm.
he's clearly told her that he doesn't see her in that way, and so she's
That's
just
right.
taken him at face value.
Yeah.
um
That's right.
and then it isn't until like their friendship really develops later on that like she starts to be like, oh, actually, and how comfortable she feels about him dating other people. And
Yeah.
um
And then you get those little subtle moments like the first New Year's Eve where
yeah,
they go
yeah,
together and they're dancing and they've both got that
yeah,
look on their face like
yeah,
they got the feels and they're trying to
yeah,
pretend they don't.
yeah.
So yeah, it's funny. That's yeah, interesting. Um I think for me it's strength of writing,
Hmm.
strength of characters,
Hmm.
and I mean really it's about like you could have those two characters doing anything
Mm.
anywhere and you'd have a story, right? They're so
Yeah.
beautifully matched. They're so different enough. You
Mm.
just put them in a room and watch it happen, like
Yeah.
it's which is lovely. So yeah, testament to the writing. And I loved that it's a rom-com that doesn't fall into cliches. It's because I think that sometimes, and
Mm.
we've talked about The Holiday and you know a lot of other rom-coms in our is rom-com dead, and sometimes they fall into cliches, don't they?
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
and you let them go because you think, okay, well, we know it's going to be twee and we know it's going to be a bit silly, and
Mm.
we kind of let it off because we know what we're getting. But I don't feel like this does. I think this is really
Mm.
really truthful
Yeah.
to a friendship and a relationship, which
Yeah.
is good. Yeah, so I
Yeah.
think it's that combination, like, and picking a premise, picking themes and a premise that are universal and have really broad and
Mm.
long-term
Yeah.
appeal, I think.
Yeah. And there's that, like, because so often rom-coms can be a bit kind of moralistic about like sleeping around and things like that. And I quite like the argument that they have when their friends are moving in together, and they um so Sally has a go at Harry for like sleeping around and having all these superficial relationships, but then he has a go back at her going, well, so how is your pretending you're okay with Joe and like having and
Mm,
not having any relationships helping you get over Joe? And
mm.
it's so true. It's just they're both finding different ways to kind of keep other people at a distance.
Yeah,
And
that's very
it's
true.
just two sides of the same coin, and there was no sense that one side was better than the other.
No, that's true, actually. Very well summarized. Thank you, Lorna. So will this remain one of your go-to movies
Without a doubt,
as you
yeah.
final question then, is this a Christmas movie?
Does it ever actually have Christmas in it? It's got New Year's, hasn't it? But
It's
um
another one. It's like The Holiday, right? No
yeah,
Christmas
yeah.
Day,
Yeah.
but New Year's Days. But she does get a tree.
That's true. That's true. There is the
She gets a
tree.
tree twice,
Yeah,
actually.
yeah.
Yeah,
Once with him and once without him. It's quite
yeah,
funny watching her
yeah,
wrestle with a tree, wasn't
yeah. It was funny, actually, wasn't it? So, do you think it
it?
is? Would you consider it a Christmas rom com or not?
It feels very Christmassy, doesn't it? Even if it doesn't have
It
Christmas
does.
Day in it. It
Yeah.
doesn't need Christmas Day to be Christmassy, does it?
No,
I
that's
think
true.
the thing
Yeah.
is with New Year is that it marks a new year, doesn't it? And so it helps you to
Hmm.
see that the characters.
Usually.
Yeah, it's funny that, isn't it? So
Yeah.
it gives a sense the fact that that time is passing, isn't it?
Yes,
It's an easy
exactly,
way.
exactly. Yeah, and time passing is important in this
Mm,
relationship because it is very
mm,
much a continuum of a a long period of time,
Mm.
which is, a long growing relationship, which is good,
Mm.
and also allows us to see those differences. So Christmas to Christmas, they're, mid in the second act, they're together and
Mm.
whatever, and then later they're apart, and it gives you that
Mm.
reflective moments of this is how it used to be. So yeah, it
Yeah,
does a
yeah,
lot of good
it
things.
does.
But yeah, it's funny, isn't it? I wouldn't, if someone said list your Christmas movies, I wouldn't
Mm.
necessarily go, oh,
No.
this is a Christmas movie, but it kind of is, and I kind
Yeah.
of like to watch it at this time of year because
Yeah.
it is got a lot of
Mm.
Christmas in it. So anyway,
Yeah.
right. Well, thank you for that very interesting chat about one of my favorite movies,
It's a
and
pleasure.
and it's been nice. I watched it just the other day as well, and it's I feel it gets you a bit in the Christmas spirit too, which
Yeah,
is nice.
it
So
does. It
um,
does.
does, doesn't it? Warm, makes you warm and
Mm.
fuzzy, which is good. Thank you again. Really great to chat. And we'll be chatting again. Well, actually, I think we're not chatting now till I think we're taking a break over Christmas, and then we'll be back in the new year.
Brilliant.
So thank you. And importantly, if you were watching this and you have not subscribed to the Script Department channel, please do. Please like, share, subscribe to all our channels everywhere, all over social media. You can subscribe on YouTube to get little reminders every time a new episode comes out. And if you want to have a look at what we're doing at thescriptdepartment.net, you can check out our global team of screenwriters and what we're all up to. Thank you very much. So hope you enjoyed the episode and see you soon. Bye bye.
Bye.